The strike team moved through the tunnels with military precision, their weapons casting harsh blue light against the ancient stone walls. There were 6 of them, all Velhari, all trained killers, who had been promised fortunes to eliminate one human, and one creature they did not expect. Difficulty. They did not expect resistance. They certainly did not expect Kan Dojin to walk directly toward them with his hands raised and his voice calm. "Stop," he said. And the word echoed through the tunnel like a command. The team leader, a scarred veteran named Korath, raised his weapon and aimed at Dojin's chest. "Move aside. Human, or die with the beast. If you fire that weapon, you will not leave these tunnels alive." Korath laughed, and his team laughed with him. "There are 6 of us and 1 of you," he said. "The creature is deep below, protecting her nest. You have nothing to threaten us with." Dojin smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Korath's laughter die in his throat. "You are right that I have nothing," Dojin said. "No weapons, no armor, no training. But you have forgotten something important about this place." "And what is that?" "The cameras are still broadcasting." Korath froze. He had been so focused on the mission, so confident in the secrecy of their operation, that he had not considered the possibility that they were being watched. But Dojin was right. The council drones scattered throughout the tunnels were still transmitting, and every being in the galaxy who had been following the story was now watching a Volhari strike team threaten an unarmed human. "Your employers sent you here to bury the truth," Dojin continued. "But the truth is already out, and if you kill me now, the whole galaxy will see exactly what the Velhari are willing to do to protect their profits." He took a step forward, and Korath took a step back. "You can still walk away from this," Dojin said. "The council knows about the illegal mining now. They know about the sabotage, and they know about the genocide of an indigenous species. Torvak Shen will be arrested before the day is over, and anyone associated with him will face the same justice." The team exchanged glances. They had been promised immunity, promised that their actions would be covered up the same way. Everything else had been covered up, but the human was right. The cameras changed everything. "Lower your weapons," Korath said quietly. "Sir?" One of his subordinates asked. "I said lower your weapons." He looked at Dojin with something that might have been respect. "We were hired to do a job, but that job is finished now. Whatever happens next is above our pay grade." The weapons came down, and Dojin felt the tension drain from his body. He had gambled everything on the hope that even killers had limits, and the gamble had paid off, but the relief was short-lived. A new sound echoed through the tunnels, the rumble of machinery, the whine of engines that did not belong to any species. Dojin recognized. Korath's eyes went wide. "That is not one of ours," he said. They ran together, hunter and prey united by confusion, following the sound back toward the egg chamber. What they found made Dojin's blood run cold. A second shuttle had landed, larger than the one that had brought the strike team, and from its cargo bay emerged not soldiers, but machines, automated mining drones. The same kind that had been used to strip Varath 9 bare decades ago. Torvax Shen stood among them, his silver scales gleaming in the harsh artificial light. "You should have accepted your death quietly. Human," he called out when he saw Dojin. "Now I have to clean up this mess personally. The council will destroy you for this." Dojin shouted back. "The council is paralyzed by debate and public opinion." Shen replied, "By the time they agree on what to do, the creature and her eggs will be gone, and this world will be mine again." The drones surged forward, their mining lasers powering up with a sound like screaming metal. Dojin watched them come and knew that he had no way to stop them, but he did not have to. The maw emerged from the tunnels behind him, and for the first time since they had met, Dojin saw her as the others had always seen her, a force of nature, a creature of nightmare and legend, ancient and terrible and utterly unstoppable. She roared, and the sound shook the stone beneath their feet. The drones turned toward her, their weapons tracking, but she was already moving. She tore through them like paper, her armored hide shrugging off their lasers, her claws reducing their metal bodies to scrap. Torvax Shen ran. He made it 3 steps before the maw caught him, her massive body blocking his escape, her silver eyes fixed on the being who had orchestrated the destruction of her world. "Wait," Dojin called out. The maw paused. She looked back at him, and in her eyes he saw a question. Why should she show mercy to this creature who had shown none to her? "He deserves to die," Dojin said, "but not by your claws. Not in the darkness where no one can see. Let the council have him. Let him face justice in front of the galaxy he tried to deceive. That will hurt him more than any death you could give." The maw considered this for a long moment. Then she stepped back, and Torvax Shen collapsed to the ground, sobbing with relief and terror. The council fleet arrived an hour later, responding to the unauthorized shuttle launch and the increasingly chaotic broadcast from the tunnels below. They found Dojin waiting for them at the entrance, with the maw at his side and Torvax Shen in custody. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Evidence of the illegal mining operations was uncovered, along with proof of the reactor sabotage and the frame-up that had sent Dojin to his supposed death. Shen and his associates were arrested, their assets seized, their names added to the permanent record of galactic criminals, and Vareth 9 was declared a protected sanctuary, its tunnels sealed against all future development. Its indigenous population, however small, guaranteed the right to live in peace. But when the council offered to return Dojin to human space, to restore his reputation and compensate him for everything he had endured, he surprised them. "I am staying here," he said. The arbiter who had sentenced him stared with all 4 eyes. "You wish to remain on a toxic world with a creature that was supposed to kill you?" "She was supposed to kill me," Dojin agreed. "But instead she showed me what mercy looks like when it comes from a place of strength. Her children will hatch soon, and they will need someone to teach them that not all outsiders are enemies." He looked at the maw, and she looked back at him with those silver eyes that held more intelligence and more compassion than the council had ever imagined. "I will be that someone." The Korath delegate who had invoked approving visited him one last time before the Farth Damlajan council fleet departed. She found him in the egg chamber, sitting against the warm stone wall, watching the maw tend to her nest with gentle care. "I knew you would survive," she said. Dojin smiled. "How could you possibly have known that?" "Because I have lived for many centuries, and I have learned to recognize something that most species overlook. Humans do not negotiate with death. You negotiate with life, finding ways to coexist where others see only conflict." She turned to leave, then paused at the entrance to the chamber. "Take care of her," she said. "Take care of them all." Dojin watched her go, then turned back to the maw and her eggs. In a few weeks, the first of them would hatch, and he would be there to greet them, the human who had come as a condemned prisoner and stayed as a guardian. They had sent him to his death instead. He had given an entire species a future, and somewhere in the galaxy, beings of 1,000 worlds would tell this story for generations to come. The story of a human who faced a monster and found a mother, who stood against an empire and won, who proved that the greatest strength is not the power to destroy, but the courage to understand. Kang. Dojin closed his eyes and listened to the rhythm of life growing all around him. For the first time in a very long time, he was at peace. 3 days passed in the depths of Vareth 9, and Kang Dojin did not die. The council watched from above, their confusion growing with each passing hour. Supply drones that had been programmed to retrieve his body were recalled and reprogrammed to deliver oxygen and nutrition packs instead, though no one could explain why they were bothering to keep a condemned man alive. The truth was that no one knew what to do. The proving had rules older than living memory. traditions that had been established long before humans ever left their home world. If a challenger survived for 7 days, they were declared innocent. No one had ever come close to that mark before. Dojin spent his time learning the Maw. He had started thinking of her with that name, though he suspected she had a true name in whatever language her species used. Was patient with his curiosity. She allowed him to examine the eggs, to study the chamber where she had made her nest, to piece together the story of what had happened to her world. It was a tragedy measured in decades. The mining operations had begun 60 years ago, when surveys first detected the rich mineral deposits beneath Vareth 9's surface. The Velhari had claimed the world without bothering to check whether anything already lived there. And the drilling had started within months. The Maw's people had lived in the deep places then, a species that had evolved over millions of years to thrive in the darkness below. They were not numerous, perhaps a few hundred at most, but they had been content. Then the miners came with their machines and their chemicals and their endless hunger for resources. The tunnels that the Maw's people had carved over generations were flooded with toxic waste. The chambers where they nested were blasted open and stripped bare one by one. The Maw's family died. Her parents, her siblings, her mate. She was the last adult of her kind. And these eggs were the final hope for her species when the first challengers came. She had tried to communicate. She had approached them without aggression, hoping that these new beings might understand what they had done and what they could do to make amends. They had responded with weapons. Every challenger since had been the same: armed, aggressive, determined to destroy the monster in the depths rather than understand the mother protecting her children. Until Dojin, he sat with her now in the egg chamber, his back against the warm stone wall, watching the shadows move inside their crystalline shells. His oxygen supply had been replenished 3 times, and his survival suit was beginning to show signs of wear from the constant exposure to the tunnel environment. But he was alive. And more than that, he was thinking the council was watching. That thought had been growing in his mind for hours, taking shape like a plan assembling itself from scattered pieces. Every challenger who came down here had tried to fight, and everyone had failed. But Dojin had something none of them had possessed. He had leveraged the cameras. In the tunnels were still broadcasting. The entire galaxy was watching a human live peacefully alongside a creature that was supposed to be a mindless killing machine. If he could make them understand the truth about the Maw, if he could expose what had really happened on Vareth 9, then maybe he could do more than just survive. Maybe he could save an entire species. "I need to find a camera," he said to the Maw. And though she could not understand his words, she seemed to sense his intent. She led him through the tunnels to a place where council drones had been destroyed years ago, their wreckage scattered across the stone floor among the debris. Dojin found what he was looking for, a recorder that was still functional, still broadcasting back to the station above. He picked it up and looked directly into its lens. "My name is Kang Dojin," he said, "and I am speaking to everyone who can hear my voice. I was sent down here to die because I was framed for a crime I did not commit." The Velhari Mine Consortium sabotaged their own reactor to cover up decades of illegal operations, and they blamed me to silence anyone who might expose the truth. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But I did not die. And the reason I survived is because everything you think you know about the Maw is wrong. She is not a monster. She is not a mindless beast. She is the last of her species. And she has been fighting for 60 years to protect her unborn children from those who destroyed her world." He turned the camera, showing the egg chamber behind him. The warm glow of the crystals and the massive shape of the Maw curled protectively around her nest. The council sent challengers down here to eliminate a problem. But the problem was never the creature in the depths. It was the corporations that poisoned her home and killed her family. Every being who died in these tunnels came with weapons and aggression. And she responded the only way she could. She defended herself and her children against invaders who refused to see her as anything other than an obstacle. Dojin's voice hardened. I have the evidence of what was done here. I have seen the toxic waste dumped into the tunnels, the destruction of nesting sites, the systematic genocide of a sentient species that was never given a chance to defend itself through legal channels. And I am not coming back to the surface until someone answers for these crimes. He looked directly into the camera, and his eyes held the fierce determination of a man who had nothing left to lose. The Maw is not a monster, he said. She is a mother, and I am going to help her protect her children, whether the council approves or not. On the station above, chaos erupted. The footage spread across the galactic network faster than anyone could contain it. Viewed by billions of beings on thousands of worlds, public opinion shifted like a tide turning. And suddenly the council found itself facing questions it had no good answers for. Why have the mining operations continued for so long without oversight? Why had no one investigated the ecological impact on indigenous species? Why had the Velhari been allowed to frame a human engineer for their crimes? Torvax Shen watched the broadcast from his quarters, and for the first time since this began, he felt fear. The evidence Dojin claimed to have was real. Shen knew that because he was the one who had buried it. If investigators started looking into the reactor sabotage, they would find the trail, and that trail led directly to him. He contacted his associates in the Velhari delegation, and they held a hurried conference as the political situation deteriorated around them. The solution they arrived at was simple. If Dojin would not die on his own, they would send someone to kill him. A strike team was assembled, equipped with the most advanced weapons the Velhari could provide, and launched toward the surface of Vareth 9 with orders to eliminate both the human and the creature he had befriended. They told no one on the council by the time their shuttle entered the planet's atmosphere. Dojin had no idea what was coming, but the Maw did. She raised her head from the nest, her silver eyes fixed on the ceiling of the chamber, and she made a sound that Dojin had not heard before, a warning, deep and resonant, that vibrated through the stone beneath his feet. What is it? He asked. The answer came in the form of distant explosions, the sound of weapons fire echoing through the tunnels above. Someone was coming, and they were not coming to talk. Dojin rose to his feet and looked at the Maw, at the eggs she had spent decades protecting, at the last hope of a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction. Stay here, he said. Protect your children, and I will protect you. He did not know how he was going to do that. He had no weapons, no armor, no training for combat, but he had something else. Something that had kept him alive when everyone expected him to die. He had hope, and he had the desperate courage of a man who had found something worth fighting for. Kang Dojin walked toward the sound of the explosions, ready to face whatever was coming. The darkness was absolute, but Dojin could feel the creature's presence like a weight pressing against his skin. Its breath washed over him in waves, warm and strange, carrying a scent that his suit's filters struggled to process. He kept his eyes closed and his body still, fighting every survival instinct that demanded he flee. Minutes passed. The creature circled him in the darkness, and Dojin tracked its movement by sound alone. The scrape of claws against stone, the whisper of displaced air, the steady rhythm of breathing that seemed to fill the entire chamber. It was stunning him. The realization cut through his fear like a blade. The Maw was not attacking, was not preparing to strike, was simply observing this strange small thing that had wandered into its domain. Dojin opened his eyes. He could see nothing in the absolute darkness, but he turned his face toward the sound of breathing and spoke. I am not here to hurt you. His voice sounded thin and fragile in the vast space, swallowed by shadows before it could travel far. The creature went silent for a heartbeat. Dojin thought he had made a terrible mistake. That speaking had triggered the attack he had been trying to avoid, but then the breathing resumed. And this time, it was closer. He felt something brush against him, not a claw or a fang, but something softer, almost gentle. The creature was touching him. Exploring the texture of his survival suit with what might have been a nose or a sensory organ, he could not imagine Dojin remained perfectly still. "I know you can understand me," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "Maybe not my words, but the meaning behind them carries across any language and any species. I am not a threat. I did not come here to fight." The touching stopped in the silence that followed. Dojin heard something that made his heart ache. Sound so soft and so sad that it barely qualified as noise at all. The creature was keening. A low vibration that resonated in his chest like grief made audible. He reached out slowly, telegraphing every movement, and his hand found something warm in the darkness. It was a hide of some kind, rough and ridged like armor plating, but beneath it he could feel the pulse of life, the rhythm of a heart that beat with the same desperate persistence as his own. "What happened to you?" he whispered. The creature did not answer in words, but it pressed closer. And Dojin understood that he had been right. This was not a monster. This was not a mindless beast that killed for pleasure. This was a being in pain, lashing out at a universe that had taken everything from it. He thought about what the council had told him, decades of mining operations, tunnels carved through the rock, resources extracted without regard for what might already live in the darkness below. The maw had not appeared from nowhere, it had been here all along. And the miners had invaded its home. Dojin turned on his light. The creature flinched back from the sudden brightness. And for the first time, he saw what he had been touching in the darkness. The maw was enormous, easily the size of a shuttlecraft, with a body covered in overlapping plates of natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. Its head was broad and flat, dominated by 4 eyes that reflected his light like pools of liquid silver. But what struck Dojin most was not its size or its strength. It was the scars. The creature's hide was covered in them, crisscrossing patterns of old wounds that spoke of battles fought and pain endured. Some were clearly from weapons, the distinctive burns of energy rifles and the clean cuts of plasma blades. Others were older, deeper, the kind of scars that came from something more fundamental than combat. "They hurt you," Dojin said. The Maul watched him with those silver eyes, and he saw intelligence there. Ancient and weary and wounded, this was no animal acting on instinct. This was a thinking being that had been fighting for its survival for longer than he had been alive. Slowly, carefully, Dojin lowered himself to the ground until he was sitting with his back against the chamber wall. He made himself small, non-threatening, and he waited. The creature circled him once more. But this time, there was no aggression in its movement. It was simply watching, evaluating, trying to understand this strange human who did not run and did not fight. Then it did something that made Dojin's breath catch in his throat. The maw lowered its massive head until it was level with his face, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from its body. And it made a sound, not a growl, not a roar, a question. It was a soft, rumbling vocalization that rose at the end like a query. And Dojin understood with sudden clarity that the creature was asking him something. Why are you here? Why are you different? Why do you not fear me the way all the others did? I am different because I know what it is like to be hunted, Dojin said. And his voice did not waver. I know what it is like to be accused of things you did not do, to be sentenced to death by those who do not care about truth and justice. I came here because the council wanted me dead, and they thought you would be the instrument of my execution. The Maw listened, but I looked at the evidence. Dojin continued, and I saw something that none of them bothered to see. Every challenger who came before me treated you as a monster to be destroyed. They brought weapons and armor and the intention to kill, and you defeated them all. Not because you are evil, but because you were defending something. The creature's eyes flickered. What are you protecting? Dojin asked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the maw turned and began to move deeper into the tunnels, pausing after a few steps to look back at him with those silver eyes. It was an invitation. Dojin rose on shaking legs and followed. The creature led him through passages he never would have found on his own, down into the depths of Varith 9, where the air grew warmer and the stone walls gave way to something that looked almost organic. And then they emerged into a chamber that stole the breath from his lungs. It was vast, cathedral-like, filled with a soft blue glow that came from crystals embedded in the walls. But what made Dojin stop in his tracks was not the size of the space or the beauty of the light. It was the eggs. Dozens of them, each one the size of a human torso, nestled in depressions carved into the chamber floor. They pulsed with a gentle warmth, and Dojin could see shadows moving inside them, life waiting to be born. The maw moved to the center of the chamber and curled around the eggs with a gentleness that seemed impossible for something so large and powerful, and Dojin understood everything. You are Mother, he whispered. The creature looked at him, and in its silver eyes, he saw a question that needed no translation. Will you help us, or will you be like all the others? Dojin walked forward until he stood before the maw and her unborn children, and he knelt on the warm stone floor. I will help you, he promised. I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. High above them, on the council station, the observers watched Dojin's vital signs with growing confusion. He should have been dead by now. Instead, his heart rate was calm, his breathing steady, and the cameras they had planted in the tunnels showed something impossible. A human kneeling before the maw, surrounded by eggs, alive and unharmed, for the first time in decades. The council did not know what to do. The pod hit the ground with a force that rattled every bone in Dojin's body, and for a long moment, he simply lay there in the darkness, waiting for his heart to stop pounding. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw nothing. The tunnels of Varith 9 were darker than anything he had ever experienced. A complete absence of light that pressed against him like a physical weight. His survival suit hummed softly as it activated its basic functions, and a small display on his wrist flickered to life. Oxygen supply at 98%. Estimated time remaining, 23 hours. Temperature, -40 degrees. Atmospheric composition, toxic. He had less than a day to survive in a frozen hell filled with poisonous air, hunted by a creature that had killed every challenger before him. Dojin pulled himself out of the pod's wreckage and stood on shaking legs. The suit's built-in light cast a weak glow that barely penetrated the darkness, illuminating rough stone walls covered in something that glistened like wet ice. He was in a tunnel, narrow and winding, carved either by ancient water or by something far less natural. High above him, he knew the council was watching. His vital signs were being broadcast to the station, displayed on screens for the entertainment of beings who considered his death a foregone conclusion. Let them watch. He thought, let them see what a human does when he has nothing left to lose. He began to walk. The tunnels twisted and branched in ways that seemed almost deliberate, and Dojin quickly realized that he would never be able to map them in his mind. Instead, he focused on observation, on the details that might mean the difference between life and death. The walls were scarred in places, marked by deep gouges that could only have been made by something massive and powerful. The maw had passed through here, probably many times, and Dojin studied the patterns of the marks as he moved. They were not random. The gouges appeared in clusters, concentrated at certain intersections and absent from others. And the more Dojin looked, the more he began to see a pattern emerging. The creature was avoiding specific areas of the tunnel system. He filed that information away and kept moving. An hour into his descent, he found the first body. It was a Corvan, or what remained of one, still wearing the tattered remnants of combat armor that had been torn apart like paper. A weapon lay nearby, some kind of energy rifle that had been bent nearly in half. Dojin crouched beside the remains and studied them with the clinical detachment that shock provides. The Corvan had come down here armed and armored, ready for battle, and the Maw had destroyed him anyway. There was a lesson in that. He continued deeper into the tunnels, and he found more bodies as he went. A Velahari strike team, still clutching their weapons in skeletal hands, a pair of Tarath hunters, their specialized tracking equipment scattered across the stone floor, a single Manari warrior, massive even in death, who had apparently tried to fight the creature with nothing but a blade. Every one of them had come with violence in their hearts, and every one of them had died. Dojin stopped walking. He stood in the darkness, surrounded by the remains of those who had failed before him, and he forced himself to think the council had sent dozens of challengers against the Maw over the decades, and not one had survived. But what struck Dojin now was not the number of deaths. It was the similarity of them. Every single challenger had approached this as a hunt. They had brought weapons designed to kill, armor designed to protect, strategies designed for combat. They had treated the Maw as prey to be eliminated, and the Maw had proven them wrong every single time. What if that was the mistake? Dojin thought about the pattern he had noticed in the tunnel walls, the way the creatures seemed to move with purpose rather than random aggression. He thought about the areas the Maw avoided, wondered what might be there that would cause such a powerful being to stay away. And he thought about something his grandmother had told him once, back on Earth, when he was just a boy afraid of the dogs that roamed the streets near their home. Animals are not evil, she had said. They do not hate. They are not cruel, and they do not kill for pleasure the way humans sometimes do when an animal attacks. It is because it is hungry or afraid or protecting something precious. If you want to survive, you must understand which one it is. The Maw had been killing for decades, not eating its victims, not claiming territory, just killing anyone who entered its domain. That was not hunger. That was not random aggression. That was protection. Dojin made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone watching from above. He found a chamber where the gouges on the walls were fresh, where the air carried a strange scent that his suit's filters could not entirely block. And he sat down. He turned off his light. He made himself small and still and patient in the darkness. And he waited. The hours crawled past. His oxygen dropped from 90% to 80, then to 70. His muscles cramped from sitting motionless on the frozen stone, and his mind wandered through memories of Earth, of sunlight, of all the things he might never see again. But he did not move. He did not reach for a weapon he did not have. He simply existed in the darkness, offering no threat to whatever might find him there. Somewhere in the tunnels, he heard movement. It started as a distant rumble, felt more than heard, a vibration that traveled through the stone beneath him. Then came the sound of something massive displacing air, of claws scraping against rock, of breath that echoed through the passages like the wind before a storm. Dojin's heart pounded so hard, he was certain the creature could hear it. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to do something other than sit helpless in the path of the thing that was coming. But he had made his choice. If he was going to die, he would die proving that there was another way. The breathing grew louder, closer, and then, in the absolute darkness of the tunnel, Dojin felt warmth against his face, the exhale of something enormous, something alive, something that had found him. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply sat there, a small human in a hostile world, and waited to learn whether his gamble would pay off, or whether this would be the last moment of his life. The creature breathed again, and this time, Dojin heard something in the sound that made his blood run cold. It was not growling. It was not preparing to attack. It was curious, and in that moment, Kang Dojin understood that everything the council believed about the Maw was wrong. The courtroom smelled like recycled air and cold metal. And Kang Dojin stood at its center with chains around his wrists. He had been standing for 3 hours now, listening to aliens speak about his crimes in languages he barely understood, watching their translucent faces twist with expressions that might have been disgust, or might have been something else entirely. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to make the accused feel small, and it succeeded. 17 species sat in judgment above him, their seats arranged in a spiral that climbed toward a ceiling lost in shadow. And not one of them looked at him with anything resembling sympathy. The human engineer known as Kang Dojin stands accused of criminal negligence resulting in the deaths of 17 Velhari workers, the chief arbiter announced, her voice echoing through the vast space like the toll of a funeral bell. Dojin did not flinch. He had stopped flinching 2 weeks ago, when they first dragged him from his quarters and threw him into a cell that was never meant for human anatomy. He had learned since then that showing weakness only made them hungrier. The reactor failure aboard mining station Vera 7 has been traced to modifications made by the accused, the arbiter continued, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she read from the holographic display before her. Evidence suggests deliberate sabotage motivated by financial disputes with the Velhari mining consortium. Lies. Every word was a lie, and Dojin knew exactly who had crafted them across the chamber. Seated among the Velhari delegation, a male with silver scales and calculating eyes watched the proceedings with barely concealed satisfaction. His name was Torvak Shen, and he was the one who had actually sabotaged the reactor. Dojin had discovered the fraud 3 months ago, millions in stolen resources, safety protocols disabled to increase profit margins, workers exposed to radiation levels that would kill them, slowly over years rather than quickly in an explosion. He had gathered evidence. He had prepared to report everything to the council. And then the reactor had exploded. And suddenly he was the one in chains. Does the accused wish to speak in his own defense? The arbiter asked. Though her tone suggested she considered this a formality rather than an opportunity, Dojin looked up at the spiral of alien faces above him. He had tried to explain the truth a dozen times during his imprisonment, and no one had listened. Humans were new to the galactic community, barely tolerated and widely distrusted. And the word of a Velhari executive would always carry more weight than the protests of a human engineer. I am innocent, he said simply, because he would not give them the satisfaction of hearing him beg. The arbiter made a sound that might have been laughter. The evidence speaks otherwise, she said. And Dojin watched Torvak Shen smile. The trial lasted another hour. But the verdict was never in doubt. Guilty on all counts. The punishment was death, delivered with the cold efficiency that the council applied to all matters involving species they considered expendable. But then something unexpected happened. A Korath delegate, ancient and weathered with age, rose from her seat in the upper spiral and raised one gnarled hand. I invoked the right of proving, she said. And the chamber fell silent. Dojin did not know what that meant, but he saw the way the other delegates shifted in their seats. The way Torvak Shen's smile faltered for just a moment. The right of proving has not been invoked in 60 cycles, the arbiter said carefully. It remains valid under council law, the Korath replied, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. The accused may choose to face the proving rather than accept execution. And if he survives, his innocence is established beyond question. Hope flickered in Dojin's chest. Small and fragile, what is the proving? He asked, the arbiter's 4 eyes fixed on him with something that might have been pity on. The world below us lies a creature known as the Maw, she explained. It has terrorized our mining operations for decades, killing every team we have sent to eliminate it, and destroying every drone we have deployed to study it. The proving is simple. you will be sent into its territory. And if you emerge alive, you will be declared innocent. How many have survived? Dojin asked. None. The word hung in the air like a death sentence of its own. And Dojin understood what was being offered to him. This was not mercy. This was entertainment. The council wanted to watch him die in a more interesting way than simple execution. And the Korath delegate had given them the excuse to do it. He looked up at the spiral of faces again, saw the hunger in their eyes, the anticipation of a spectacle. Torvak Shen was smiling once more, confident that either outcome would serve his purposes. Dojin thought about the 17 workers who had died because of that smile, thought about the evidence that would be buried forever if he accepted execution quietly, thought about everything he had learned about survival in the months since he had left Earth. I accept, he said. The chamber erupted in murmurs, and the Arbiter raised her hand for silence. You understand that no weapon will be provided, and no assistance will be given, she said. You will be dropped into the tunnels with only a survival suit and limited oxygen, and you will face them all alone. I understand, and you accept these terms willingly, knowing that death is the most likely outcome? Dojin looked at Torvak Shen one last time. I would rather die fighting than let a murderer watch me kneel, he said. The Arbiter nodded, and guards moved forward to escort him from the chamber as they led him away. He passed close to the Korath delegate who had invoked the proving, and she leaned toward him with eyes that held secrets older than human civilization. Your species has a strange relationship with death, she murmured, so quietly that only he could hear. You do not surrender to it. You negotiate. Dojin did not know how to respond, so he said nothing, but he carried her words with him as they marched him to the dropship, as they stripped away everything but his survival suit, as they sealed him inside a pod that would carry him down to the dead world below, through the small viewport. He watched the council station shrink against the stars, and he thought about all the beings up there who were placing bets on how long he would last. He thought about them all waiting in the darkness below, the creature that had killed dozens of challengers, the monster that no species had ever survived, and he thought about the one advantage he had that none of them had considered. Every species that had faced the Maw before had gone down with weapons and armor, and the intention to kill Dojin had none of those things. He had only his mind, his patience, and the desperate hope that there was more to the creature below than the council understood. The pod began its descent, and Kang Dojin closed his eyes and prepared to meet the thing that was supposed to kill him.